what's important? What's going on right now? Let's see. Oh, ooh, that's a lot of information. That's why I generally look at it one at a time. All right. Indexes 366. Oh, those are weeklies. That's why it looks weird. Look, okay, so we're down 366 today, but that's basically giving back what we gained yesterday, so nobody cares. S&P also giving back yesterday's gains. Well, actually, no, because yesterday's gains for the S&P were from here to to here, and now we're only there, so we're in good shape there. And the Nasdaq, whatever, but really, where are we? We're back to where we started Monday, right? So there's Monday, and there's Monday. We're lower than Monday, and the Russell is higher than Monday. So whole lot of nothing going on. Oil, oh dear, oh man, why is it only when I sell it? Oil had a terrible report. We should take a look at that. Holy shit, there people are giving up now. I'm so frustrated. I don't think we have any left. Oh, my horrible natural gases, 8 of those right now. The same loss, but it's now there's 8. So I'm just looking to make a little bit of money to get somewhat out of the hole. So CL, I think we got rid of them all, right? Yeah. Phew. Got rid of CL yesterday at 7, well, wherever it is. Yesterday I got rid of CL at 78.50, and I didn't get back in. So I was waiting for 80, and it never hit 80. And that was that. So screwed. And I said last week, I said I want to be here for the great big drop. Oh well, what can you do? So where were we? Oh yeah, the index is natural gas. I gotta think that natural gas is going to be bouncy at some point because we've got. Let's look at what we're down from. We're down from 10. 5 did not hold. 5 barely had any support. But from 5 to 250, at this point, you've got to think there's going to be some kind of support. Or, well, let's take that back. 5 did have support the first time. Here's 10 to 5. We bounced to 8, and of course, bouncing to 750 is the halfway point. Bouncing to 7 would be the strong bounce line. So you can see that that worked. Then back, and 6 would be the weak bounce line. So you can see how strong bounce, weak bounce was working for a long time. So here we are now from 5 back to 250. That's another 50% drop. A strong bounce now, a weak bounce would be 50 cents, would be 3, and a strong bounce is 3.50. So I would expect in the very least that we can get back to $3. There should be consolidation up to 3.50 at the strong bounce line before we fail 2.50. Now, it doesn't mean you don't fail a little bit because here's 5 and then we failed it. It went below 5, but not for very long. This is a daily chart. All right, so I'm not worried today about spikes below 250 or tomorrow, but after that, then it would start to concern me. But it's not likely that something's going to fall 50% and not bounce at all. Here it slammed back to a weak bounce and then went to the strong bounce, even went over the strong bounce, but basically you're consolidating between weak and strong. So now it's all half of that. So instead of a $2 range from 5 to 7, you're going to have the range from 250 only up to 350. But it's still the same concept. So the expectation is that we may linger here for a bit, but then we should start heading back up to the 350 range. I'm sorry, the $3 range, which is here. 302 is where we came in on this particular set. So we came in at 302. We figured 250 was the worst case. We're at the worst case. So it's very uncomfortable, unfortunately. But I'm hoping that we get back. And as I noted this morning, it's all about the timing. I'm working with these guys who are trying to raise money for an oil well. So I know all about, not an oil well, natural gas well. So I'm very up on the current state of natural gas. And I talked about it here this morning. Wow, that's huge. Why is that so huge? a little too big. Okay. Where did we talk about it? Yeah. All right. So here's what's been happening, and keep this in mind. Where's our natural gas? Keep this in mind. This is no. Actually, let's look at a longer term chart. So here's 2021. Here's 2022. So we went from 3 to 5 in 2021. And then in 2022, then we pulled back. That's a weak retrace, right? Same thing. So we pulled back, we popped over, we doubled at some point. And for most of 2022, we were up in the 650 type range around here, a bit over, a bit under. But basically, we're in the 650 range until we just started collapsing into the fall, right? So keep that in mind, and then let's look at what happened. Look at what Russia's been doing. Two things are happening. Russia, since here, this is a small fall off, but here is a ridiculous fall off. Russia cut from 250 to 50 between June and the end of the year. So in 6 months, basically, Russia went from 250 to 50 at the end of the year. That's a big spike of gas prices, right? Now we see, now it needs to be bigger. So weird. So now here's why gas prices went rocketing up. See 2021, see what happens? We went from 10 billion cubic feet of exports to 13. We went up, our exports went up 30%. Am I watching that line right? No, wait, what is this number? No, it's 15. So what's this number? I'm sorry, we went from 12 to 15. So we went from 12 to 15, which is up 25%. So we increased our exports 25% during the year of 2021. So what happens to the futures? Nope, that's not the futures. So what happens to natural gas in 2021? Notice what happens. We ramp our exports up from 12 billion cubic feet per day to 15 billion cubic feet per day. And of course, obviously, day by day by day, it gets more and more and more as we bring the terminals online. Production doesn't keep up with that. How it can't keep up with that. That's an incredible pace of expansion of exports. Now, this has been planned, because the people who are building these natural gas export terminals for billions and billions of dollars each are not idiots. They know that they're going to crash the market if they don't do it right. But it's impossible not to have some degree of disruption while you're doing it. There's, they order the gas for storage, they compress the gas, they put it into their things, so on and so forth. But then the problem is, as soon as they get backed up, so if there's any delay, or in this case, what happened to us in the last month or so, is a major export terminal, and there's only like 6 of them, had cracks in the structure, and there was a structural issue. And so they've spent the last month and a half basically fixing it and getting it recertified. Because you don't want one of these things to just blow up. That would be very bad. Tremendous pressure and compression for these things. And it's got to be, and the terminals that do the compressing and then put them into the cargo ships, it's a crazy process. So, super high tech stuff, basically. Anyway, so one terminal's been offline. That terminal being offline, since we produce, at this point, we probably produce more natural gas to export than we do for what we use in the country. As crazy as that seems, like half the natural gas we produce now is for export. So if you take your export offline, your export is 20% of the total capacity of online, of your natural gas, then what's going to happen? Then in country, we're going to get backed up with 20% of our natural gas. it's as if usage dropped 20% because all this natural gas is now stuck in the US. And if you can't compress it, and you can't because all the other terminals are busy 24 hours a day, if you can't compress it, it ends up getting wasted. So the natural gas companies, they try to sell it for whatever they can get for it. Once you start running a well, here's the thing. Once you start running a well, it starts depleting. And you have only a limited amount of time to sell your gas at peak capacity. It's not even a year. It doesn't even run at peak capacity for a year. And by year 2, it's down 50%. And by year 3, you're down another 50%. So, your output of the well is for 2 years to get anything really out of it. And the rest is just sort of like money that trickles in over time. But it's very, very low compared to what you start with. And generally, when you invest in a natural gas well, you're expecting to get your total investment back in 2 years, and the rest is profits that trickle in. Now, that's not bad. You'll probably make 50% more than you invested, something 75% more than you invested if it goes well. And that means that you'll get your money back over the first couple of years, and then for the rest of the decade after that, you'll get let's say 7%, 8% a year of what you would put in, but you've got your money to recycle. So if you then recycle your money, and you can recycle it while it's getting paid back, you don't have to wait till the end of 2 years. You recycle your money and have 5 wells, 10 wells, 20 wells, 30 wells. It starts making sense, right? It's the same money. You just recycle it over and over and over again, starting new wells. And each time the wells pump in more money, you take more money and put up a new well. And once you have a couple of dozen wells, you're getting some incredible cash flow. Your cash flow is pretty much your original investment on an annual basis. But that's because you recycle the money into multiple wells, just like any other, just like the dividend strategies we use. It's not any different. But you've got to keep reinvesting, otherwise it's just like a dividend stock, right? Otherwise it's just a boring investment. But if you reinvest the dividends, it suddenly turns into a money machine. It's the same dividend, it's just a question of whether or not you're reinvesting the profits. So, yeah, if anybody wants to invest 17 million in a couple of wells, I got some guys I'm working with who are looking for investors. And now's probably a good time because frankly, it's cheap. It's cheaper than it usually is. And so if the well takes about 8 months to set up, and then it starts producing. So 8 months, you start getting your money back, and probably 1/24th at a time, roughly 1/24th at a time. You get more in the beginning and less in the later part. Where was I? Yeah, so, I know what I was saying. So if in the next 12 months, natural gas goes up back to like 450, then your profits are going to be tremendous because it's going to be this unexpected boom in profits. Realistically, $2 is about break even for a well. So if it goes down below $2, everybody's going to start even right now, it's hard to get investors because everybody's like, oh, that's, we were getting double, triple our money when gas was more expensive. And now we're getting, like I said, maybe 1.75 back if you're lucky. And so that's a turnoff to the same investors who had been paying for all the wells in the last few years. That means much less drilling is being done now. So that means that 8 months from now, there's going to be less wells being dug. And at the same time, this is going to happen. Here's 2023. We're going from 15 billion cubic feet to 18 billion cubic feet. That's another 20%. And you see how these are planned? It's, well, that's not 20%, it's 4 million. So this was 50%, then plateau, 25% plateau, 20%, and not quite a plateau, but they're going to then ease up from there because they have a certain expectation of topping out somewhere. But we're like the Saudi Arabia of natural gas, okay? And Saudi Arabia did the same thing. All these people are professionals. It's not like they don't know what they're doing. Okay, this is all planned out. They said we're going to build these terminals and we're going to ramp up the supply of gas. Then we're going to have the terminals supplied. Then we're going to build more terminals and we'll ramp up the supply of gas. This is how it works. So we just went through a flat year in 2022, and that caused the price of gas to come down because it's been flat exports. This isn't production, this is exports, but this is a flat export of natural gas. Obviously, the production needs to keep up. And then now we're going to export another 20% of, well, yeah. So we're going to now we're going to export another 20% of the total supply. But then if you look at the total natural gas supply, I had that somewhere, didn't I? Why do I feel like I saw that? Oh, well, I swear I had that. Oh, maybe it's this. Oh, yeah, that's real tiny. But anyways, this is a 5-year moving average of natural gas, and we are here, and we're in the middle of the range. Now, if you think of it, well, I got to read that to you. This is, I can't read it, so there we go. Well, I still can't read it. All right. So anyway, so here's our normal range, and here's where we are now at 2.5. Now, here's 2.5 and here's 2. That's the key. So that's how far, which is far, that's how far we can drop, like out of the range and looking like we're very short on natural gas by exporting 20% more. So unless production really keeps up over the next year, it won't. And now what's happening, those production is declining because people aren't investing. And then 8 months from now, there's going to be a drastic shortage because the export terminals are going to be online. They're going to take the natural gas and send it overseas. But we are not producing enough new natural gas to do it. Only crazy people who invest right now at the bottom are the ones who are going to make the money. So it could turn out to be a huge bonus. It's an interesting thing, but getting the timing right is tough. The guy who's doing the drilling, his name is Jay, and I was talking to him, and he said, if you have patient investors, we can sort of, you know, we've got a 3 to 6 month window. We don't have to start the well. So that's the thing. Once they start the well, they're kind of stuck with it, and they got to start putting the gas into the pipeline. But if they don't start the well, they can complete the well and wait for prices to be better before they hit the button and start putting out the money. So that's a really valid possibility because, you know, really, if you really feel strongly that prices are coming back or going higher, and you wait 3 months, 6 months for prices to go from $3 to $4, that's a lot of money. That's going to be tens of millions of dollars of money coming back on the project. It's a 2-well project. And they got 4 of these projects that they're working on. So anyways, really cool stuff. This is up in West Virginia, up by Pittsburgh. Oh, where? Well, what's the name of that school up there? Oh, WVU, West Virginia University, right? It's right around there. Anywho, so that's that. And now let's take a look at the report. Petroleum status report. What the hell? What is this? Look at Google. Google's trying to, oh, look, list and journeys. Google's getting weird, huh? I guess they're really feeling the heat from the OpenAI. Is it going to open it? Whoa, it's doing all kinds of weird things. All right, here we go. So week ending January 27th, right? Blah, blah, blah. All right, so we got a 4 million barrel build of oil. We have a 2.6 million barrel build of gasoline and a 2.3 million barrel build. This is bad for them, man. And 2.3 million barrel build of distillate. So that is 9 million total barrels billed. That's messed up. Nothing happened with the Strategic Petroleum Reserve. Exports of product was still 4 million barrels a day, down a little bit from last week, which was 4.125. So basically, 2 million barrels of the build is because we exported a little bit less. All other oils went down, so that's not counted. That's interesting. But we look at how much higher all other oils are from last year. So on the whole, nothing very unusual going on here. Um, 19.3, they increased the total product supplied by about 400,000 a day. So we call that 3 million barrels is from increasing product supplied. Prices are much cheaper. Well, yeah, I mean, they're look at last year. Last year was $87 for oil. Now it's 79. Last week it was 81. Today it's 76, right? Where is that thing? Yeah, today we're at 76, 76.50. Almost want to go long at this price. So that's good. Gasoline, unfortunately, though, look, last year, see, oil is significantly cheaper than it was last year. Gasoline, as I was complaining yesterday or whenever the hell I was bitching about it, gasoline is not. Gasoline is more money, which makes no sense whatsoever, of course. And that's where we are there. We got the Fed coming up. Up. FOMC meeting calendar. Oh, it's not going to have a thing. They got it when it comes out. It's going to have a thing. I don't think we're going to get all that. All right, so that's coming up in 30 minutes. Very exciting. Nobody has any questions, so I can just keep rambling on. What did we talk about today? What did we discuss? I like I don't know. I love silly things like that. Anyway, what did we discuss? So the S&P is nicely over. Remember what the trick is to get this blue line, the 50-day moving average, to cross over the 200-day moving average. That's a bullish technical signal. And what it should do, in theory, is strengthen the support of the blue line of the 50-day moving average. So as it's going up, it should, and again, not always, it should be more of a bounce. It should have more support. Now here it was under, though. That's a different thing. That's a bearish signal when the 50 is under the 200. But when the 50 goes over the 200, bullish signal, and you should see nice support from the 50 as it moves up. We'll see what happens. And don't forget, every day that you finish above the 50-day moving average means you're moving the 50-day moving average higher, right? Your today is higher than the 50-day. How much higher? Well, here it's 130 points higher. So we take 130, we divide it by 50. It's kind of like 3. And that means every day that this is up here, it's going to take this guy 3 points higher. And then how much is the gap between these two? The gap is 50 points. How many days, if it moves 3 points higher, are you going to, now the 200-day moves up also, but obviously much less. How many days will you go 3? Well, in fact, you can calculate it because say the 50-day goes up 3, the 200 will go up less than 1. Therefore, you're going to gain 2 point something points. Means it's going to take you, though, to make up wait, what do we say it was? Oh no, those moving averages are only 9 points apart. What was I looking at? 3, 9, 4, 5, and 5, 4. Right. They're only 9 points apart. That means you got days? Why did I think it was different? I'm checking all my numbers. Yeah, you're only 9 points apart. So that means that even at this pace, if we stay up here, we're going to pull the 50 over by next week. That's nice. That would be a bullish situation. I don't know why I thought it was a longer period. I think I did the math wrong the other day. So that's how you calculate it, but make sure you calculate it correctly when you do that. We're still very 50-50 on the earnings. Unfortunately, the debt ceiling, this includes all the games. So Goldman Sachs did an analysis that including all the games that they can possibly play, when we run completely out of money at this limit, which is what they were arguing about raising, right? At this limit at 31.3 billion, because we are past that already as far as real debt. What they do though is they offset and they say they declare this bill to be here, they declare this payment here, and they hold back on certain payments, or they push it off, or they throw it in some other balance thing. They just all kinds of accounting tricks to stop themselves from going over the debt limit, because the debt limit is a thing that Congress says you can't go past. So just like, you know, your checking account limit is what you can't go past, right? You can't go past zero, but there are overdrafts, there are other accounts, there are credit cards that you can open up. That's what the government's doing right now. They're just tapping all their possible other sources to pay bills. And apparently they've got about $1 trillion worth of those, because that's what, and don't forget, it's not government spending, it's government debt. So actually, they only, actually 500 billion. So in other words, if our total additional debt for 2023 is $1 trillion. So covering us till the end of the year with money coming in and things like that, it should only require 500 billion of additional borrowings, and we can get that without. It's still borrowing, but we can get it without violating the debt ceiling protocols, whatever they are. So the cash will run out in August. We get some corporate tax payments come in, and they think that's going to last us till October, but we physically hit the ceiling in August. They think we can let it slide by about that much. That's like a quarter of $250 billion, basically. But then by mid-September, we're really, really out of it, and that's it. And then once we're out of it, then we're violating, or whatever they want to call it. But you know, theoretically, you have to shut down. You've got to shut down the government. There's no money left. You can't possibly find another place to get it from. And money still comes in. Tax revenue still comes in. You can do things that don't incur debt. But if government spending is $6 trillion, let's say, and you are $1 billion, 6 trillion, and you're 1 trillion in debt, or you're running a $1 trillion deficit, that means that you have to cut 15% of all spending to eliminate that deficit. This is what the Republicans effectively want. They want 15% cut, but cut from where? They're saying don't just cut 15% and we're all good. You know, don't have a deficit. So what do they want cut? They want they don't want the military cut. What don't they want cut? They do want Social Security cut. They want Medicare cut. They want any aid to the Ukraine completely cut off. They want, which is really makes you worried, right? Because don't you think it's kind of important to help the Ukraine out? Don't you think we don't want? I mean, we went to freaking war, and this was Nixon, right? You can't be more Republican than Nixon. We went to war in Vietnam. Well, it wasn't Nixon that started it, but he sure as hell was pushing it. It was, who started that war? Was it Eisenhower? I don't know if it was Eisenhower. Might have been. We were there in Kennedy. Who was before Kennedy? I think it was Eisenhower. I don't know. I remember Kennedy. That's it. Before that, I have no idea who was president. So anyway, so we were in Vietnam. Everybody was in favor of that, and we were keeping China out of Vietnam. That was basically what that war was about. So, and then the same in Korea. Then we had another war in Korea over the same thing, keeping China out of Korea, out of half of it anyway. Which I guess we also did the same thing in Vietnam. We kept them out of half of it. So I guess eventually that may be what we end up doing with Ukraine, is keeping Russia out of half of it. But anyway, so it's not a typical Republican thing to not want to allow a country like Russia to take over another country. I mean, it used to be pretty universal that we would say, no, we don't stand for that sort of thing. And it's hard for Europe to take a stand without us. So we will see. Anyway, so that war is going on. And so they want to cut that. They want to cut all the discretionary spending. Now the problem is discretionary spending is only $1 trillion. The military is not, you know, the other technically discretionary item is the military. That's not discretionary. Then nobody can cut it. So if the military is not discretionary, then everything else the government does, roads, transportation, education, blah blah blah, that's all discretionary. Social Security and Medicare are, of course, they're not mandatory. What do you call them? Entitlements, right? They're the entitlements. So you can't cut. So those shouldn't be able to be cut, but the Republicans do want to cut those. They don't want to cut the military. They do want to cut every single other item. But if you do that, $1 trillion is every other single item. There is nothing else. So it's all unrealistic, and that's why Goldman Sachs is projecting. They're saying we're not going to settle this. This will not be settled. We are here, and it won't be settled here. It won't be settled here. It won't be settled here. The only thing we got going for us is tax payments come in, and we end up with some money. You know, we have the cash comes in for the IRS. That's supposed to last us all year, and that's what they're saying. Here's where it runs out, and now you're back to a deficit issue. At the moment, we're good. The cash for the entire year comes in April, and it's starting to come in now. People pay early. You know, corporations file early, people file early. So money starts coming now. We pay all of our bills with this money that's coming in as it comes in, and that should last us until here. But then all the end of the year money, that's where your $1 trillion deficit is. And that's why you can have a debt ceiling thing that we're having now without it. But of course, that means you can't budget, you can't spend, you got to watch out. You know, every single thing has to be accounted for, which is frankly not the worst thing, is to actually account for your money. But it's just not realistic. The way they're doing it is not realistic, and what they want cut is not realistic, and it's not going to happen. So Goldman Sachs thinks this budget fight is going to last all the way until there's some serious pain, and then maybe political pressure 1 year before the next election is going to start swaying people to settle something, hopefully. But that doesn't mean it will happen before millions of people are laid off or whatever the hell happens. Last time 1 million people were laid off, last time they had a big disagreement. So we shall see. Very exciting stuff. All right. So that's all what we talked about before the bell today. I talked about COVID and how it's effectively, well, you know, at this point now, COVID, it's not going to go away ever. It's just going to be a cause of death. So it kills 1 million people a year right now. Cancer kills 10 million people. Heart disease kills 18 million people. Tuberculosis and car accidents, 1.2. HIV, 1 million, basically 900,000. So it's on the level of worrying about getting AIDS or getting a car accident or getting tuberculosis. Some parts of the world you do worry about that shit. You know, car accident's a car accident. What are you going to do? But those are global numbers, so it's not that likely that these things are going to happen to you. It's not that likely you'll die of COVID. Getting COVID is different, but there's I should have looked it up. The flu is in there somewhere too. The flu probably kills about 600,000 people, or 250 or something like that, maybe a quarter of what COVID does. But it's also a worldwide leading cause of death. Why didn't I put that chart in? Did I? There was a very nice chart for that. Oh well. All the ways you can die. So I'm saying, bottom line is, look, we got past the Chinese New Year. That was a big worry we had. It did not kick off another global wave of COVID. So boom, problem solved. We didn't know what was going to happen. What happened is nothing, apparently. You don't know what's going on in China. They won't talk about it. But outside of China, it's not hitting us. The Chinese are traveling. They're getting on planes. They certainly have a lot more COVID, but the rest of the world has developed essentially a herd immunity. So it doesn't spread that fast because or bad cases don't spread that fast. Most people have already had COVID. You know, with all of our intentions and so on and so forth, most people in this country have had COVID. Officially, 1/3 of the people in this country have had COVID. Unofficially, I would say it's probably 2/3. Because people get sick, they're in bed for a couple of days, and they get up and they feel okay. That could have been COVID. You don't know because you don't get tested. People aren't getting themselves tested. Nobody's running out and buying, $15 tests every time they sneeze. Some people are. And again, you know who does it though? But this is a problem we always have when we're looking at things. And I say we, people in the top 10% who have enough money in their life to invest some of it, which is only the top 10% of the people in the world. Everyone else is living hand to mouth, basically. So when we think about that situation, we think about our friends who have disposable incomes. And we know people who go out and buy 10 tests at the pharmacy, and every time you sneeze, they shove a test at you and go, here, have a test. Now, there were free tests also for a while. But the point is that it's the people in the upper classes who are the ones who are testing themselves and testing their children and testing their friends, because they don't care if it's 15 here and 15 there, and they're going to run to the doctor and they don't give a crap about the copay or anything else. But most people, the vast majority of people in this country, can't afford a $15 test. Also, you got to have multiple tests or it doesn't mean anything. They can't afford the tests. They don't want to pay to go to the doctor. They can't afford to miss work. They can't afford this and that. So when they get sick, they will gut it out unless it's really bad. And because of the vaccines and because of the herd immunity where you get a milder exposure, there's a payload issue also to how much exposure you have when you get sick and how much of the virus you have and so on and so forth. But a huge amount of people get a mild case of COVID now, and they don't think it's even COVID, and they don't care if it's COVID. If you're sick for a couple of days and you get better, you say, oh, I had the flu. You don't say, oh, I had COVID. And you certainly don't pick up the phone and call the CDC. You didn't go to a doctor. You didn't go to a pharmacy. You didn't report at a testing center. You just had a cold and you got better. That's not COVID. Even if it was COVID, it doesn't count. So globally, this is true also, and worldwide numbers are severely, severely underreported. But especially in the US, where you've got, so many people don't even believe it's a real thing. It's just so crazy, but that's beside the point. So anyway, the bottom line is, if you look at the world, and we talked about herd immunity, I don't want to get into the whole thing again, but when you look at the world, what's happened is China got very, very sick for the month of December and into January. Now they had their New Year's celebrations where they all visit each other, which means they're even more so getting everybody sick. But it's not cascading out to the rest of the world, and they seem to be dealing with it. They don't have their pharmacy shelves are getting filled back up. They've got availability of vaccines and so on and so forth, and they've got the availability of the COVID medications. When you are sick, their hospitals aren't overflowed like they were last month. So it's calming down over there too. and they had overflowing funeral homes last month, but now it's, it happened. It went through the population. The people who died, and and other people lived. So now they're not, so they've got their own herd immunity building up now. And once you have that, again, it goes back to it starts becoming kind of like the flu. And the worst part of this is Ron DeSantis thinks he's a genius because he never closed Florida at all. He never had any restrictions and so on and so forth. And we're all fine, basically. And we are all fine. I don't know anyone who died of COVID. I was told a couple of people died of COVID, but not in my immediate circle. But I mean, I know people said, oh, this guy died of COVID, that guy died of COVID. But I know a lot of people who were very sick. I know people who went to the hospital with COVID, but the deaths weren't really that bad. And I don't know anybody who's permanently disabled from COVID. But most people I know got it or think they got it. So that's how Florida handled COVID. It was just ignored it, and it turned out like it was survivable. All right, so what else? So hopefully we can move forward. So the bottom line is, anyway, all that gets to, we're not going to worry about COVID now. That's off our list of worries. It's a big thing to have off the list. That puts travel stocks back on the table. It puts airlines back on the table. It puts cruise ships back on the table. It puts casinos back on the table. Hotels back on the table, right? A lot of stuff goes back on the table. Occupancy in office buildings, I think that was from today, just went past 50%. I don't know if that was one city or in general. What? Thought that was from today. Anyway, so, all right, well, we can look this up somehow. Occupancy, 50%. U.S. offices, see? I know I read that somewhere. So that was Bloomberg. Oh, that was from yesterday's news, that's why. So U.S. offices reached 50% occupancy for the first time since the pandemic. So that's pretty good, but you have to say 50% from what? That's the key. Here you go, here's a chart. So not last year. So we've been drifting along. It's not that impressive because here's where we were. We were at 48, 37, 49. You assume this is a statistical malfunction because it's Thanksgiving. That's why. Okay, so that's Thanksgiving. So people left the office and came back. This is Christmas, so people left the office and came back. So it's kind of silly. So what you really what you have to compare to, and it would be nice to have a bigger chart. What you have to compare to is from here and here, we're making 1% gains basically. This is 48, 49, 50. So we're making basically 1% gains back on office occupancy. At that rate, it's going to be a long time before we're ever fully staffed again. That means that all year long, if it's not a week by week gain, right? It's here's November, December, January. It's almost a monthly gain. So if we get to 62 by the end of the year, that's still pretty dead. But the thing is, if we are steadily getting back, and let's say we get back to 80 or 85% occupancy of these offices, it's not going to drastically affect the REITs. And we've been buying REITs, but people keep worrying about these commercial REITs and losing business. But they've got 5-year leases, 10-year leases, 20-year leases on these buildings. People in buildings aren't there for a year. They set up an office, they expect to be there for at least 5 years. Many longer term. Retail is definitely longer term than that. You don't want to build a store, a restaurant, or whatever, and bring crowds in and have a thing and then suddenly be kicked out. That's not how leases work. They sign long-term leases, most of these people. And so there's not a rapid turnover. And so we had COVID, but COVID had bailouts. and people were compensated, so they kept their leases. And now we're moving into the next phase. And unless these stores actually go bankrupt, they're not going to break their leases. And they're not, and when they downsize, it'll be in a nice, slow, gradual pace. So if they decide we're never going to get back to 100%, we're always going to be 80, they'll cut their space, but that's sellable by the landlord. He can sell the space that's not rented out. So it's not going to be a disaster. But then we have to consider, as far as like restaurant stocks, we have to think about in a restaurant stock, if only 60% of the people are there this year, then that's 1/3 less business than you had during COVID. And who's that not good for? It's not good for Starbucks. You know, think of your own behavior, right? You may go to Starbucks on the way to work a lot. All right, or lunch from work a lot, or a coffee break from work a lot. If you work in a city and there's a Starbucks downstairs, it's a break. You take a break, you walk downstairs, you clear your head. It's not just about the coffee. It's the whole process of like getting yourself out of the office for 15 minutes where you have a good excuse. Say, I'm just going to go grab a coffee. I'll be right back. That's like most people accept that as an excuse. But when you're home and you got to drive to here and there and there, you're probably not going to really have as many Starbucks as you do. So it's tricky for Starbucks. People aren't coming back and the money's not there. How is Starbucks doing? Let's take a look. I don't think they're doing that badly, actually. But they were not on my watch list because I was like, I can't see getting involved in Starbucks right now. That's not it. Oh yeah, see, Starbucks is way up there. But I don't like them up here. I think this is a silly price for Starbucks. I'll tell you, it's 30 times. I don't get it. It's almost a short down here. We're not going to recover to the way we were. And so in 2017, 2018, they got about 3 billion, 4.5 billion, 3.5 billion. Then COVID hits, and look at the tremendous hit they take there. So I'm no longer worried about China not reopening and hurting them. I'm not so worried about COVID, but I am questioning these numbers because they are certainly having to raise wages, and they have a lot of employees. They're one of those companies that don't make a lot of money per employee. They got 400,000 employees. All right, so these are the metrics you got to look at. So they're making $4 billion. Is that enough? Million, billion, right? Divided by 400,000 employees. They only make $10,000 per employee. And so now you look at 400,000 employees, and they're making let's say Starbucks does, whatever. Let's give them $2 an hour more. So give them $2 more an hour, and then multiply that by 40 hours a week times 52 weeks. That's $1.6 billion to give them a $2 an hour raise. That's half their freaking profits. That's not even, that's not even including inflation and the cost of their coffee and supplies and so on and so forth. But really, it's all about the labor. It's labor and rent for Starbucks. That's their number one expenses. What is that? Go to webinar. Oh, that's where we are now. Go to webinar. So that's why that employee to profit ratio is very important, or how much money you make per employee, because the less you make per employee, the more you're going to be hit by labor issues. And I know the UK workers are all on strike now. That's a big deal. Oh, it's almost Fed time. Let's talk about that though. UK worker strike. General strike. Transport workers, teachers walk off. Strikes stop Britain. 500,000 workers protest over cost of living. Britain hit by. Now, when this happens, England goes on strike. If they, if it works out for them, the French love to go on strike. They'll go right after them. The Germans will go on strike. Italians love to go on strike. Oh, stop it. Biggest strike in more than a decade. 500,000 British workers, teachers, civil servants, universities, train drivers continue without supporting. I like that. UK inflation is 10.5%. So inflation is not fixed over there. By the way, that means that their central bank is going to be raising rates, and we can't fall behind them. Wow, grocery price inflation 16.7% in 4 weeks. No wonder they're on strike. I'd be on strike too. Holy crap. But keep in mind that these guys go on strike, and then the Starbucks workers are going to go, they want more money too. Everybody wants more money. Oh, and California wants what's that minimum wage in California? Is it 22? California minimum wage. Dun, 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 dun. They want to make it 22. Where is that? California minimum wage takes effect this week. It's now $15.50 right now. California minimum wage updates. So they want to do a thing with the fast food places, the big fast food franchises, and say you got to pay $22 an hour if you're a national chain with a certain amount of stores and so on and so forth. And they are freaking out, and they have lobbying groups, and there's a war going on, and they go into the courts and all this crap. 22 by the end of 2023. That would include Starbucks. All right. Now, it's true because Starbucks cannot give, if they're at 15 now, or let's say they're at 17 now, and Starbucks has to pay 400,000 people $5 an hour more, times 40 hours a week, times 52 weeks, that's $4 billion. That, if they did that nationwide, that would be all of their profits going to the employees. So they're freaking out. McDonald's is freaking out because McDonald's is another one that doesn't make much per employee. Everybody is going apeshit over this. But you know what the problem is? The reality of this is they need $4 billion, Starbucks, right? They're being told nationally to pay $4 billion, whatever the proportion is in California. Well, they have $40 billion in revenue. And that would cost them $4 billion. So if they want to get it back, they just raise the price of coffee 10%. And so you would pay $5.50 instead of $5 for a Starbucks, right? But the workers would get a raise from $15 to $22 an hour. They get a 50% raise. And now they're suddenly making $800 a week, which I know pisses people off. I know there's people out there who are pissed off saying, are you kidding me? A barista's going to make $800 a week or more? That's what you're going to pay these restaurant workers? The guy at McDonald's flipping burgers is going to get a $40,000 salary? But that's what you need to live. That's the cost of a human being having a life without being poor, without having no money, without being in constant debt, without having a miserable existence. That's the real price. So if you can't pay $5.50 for a coffee, because Starbucks would be fine, they make $4 billion, the same as before. If you can't pay $5.50 for a coffee, or Starbucks can't figure out how to save themselves the 50 cents some other way, then maybe they just shouldn't be in business. Maybe that's not the right business. There's a lot of businesses that don't exist because they're not cost effective, right? I don't have somebody come over to my house and brush my teeth in the morning because it's not worth it for anybody. You know, nobody comes over here and dresses me and cleans my hair. There's no concierge services taking care of my car. No, you know, no kid comes from the car wash to pick up my car and take it back and so on and so forth. It's not cost effective. Would I like that service? Sure. Would I pay for it? No. I do pay ridiculous amounts of money for people to go get me food. If I just got up and went in the car and went to the restaurant, I could get it myself. Just don't feel like it. And again, my time has value. So for me to go and drive 15 minutes to the restaurant, wait around 15 minutes for them to give me my food, and then drive 15 minutes back and come home, that 45 minutes to me is worth a lot more than the extra 10 bucks I pay to have it delivered. I can make 10 bucks in 45 minutes. Therefore, it is better for me to hire somebody to do that job. You know, I might want to go out for, you know, I go out obviously to enjoy the atmosphere of restaurant, whatever. But if I just want food, it is so much more efficient for me to just sit down here and have somebody bring it to me. You know, I don't need a butler, but it's nice to have someone give me my food when I want it. Oh, fed time. Hang on, let's find out what's going on. La-di-da. What? What? Frick. Ah, where's the stupid remote? There it is. Damn it. Uh-oh. Oh, something happened. Well, I think the last time I used this TV was the last time the Fed had a meeting. Why is there no thing here? Oh, there it is. 25 points. Recent indicators point to modest growth in spending, job production, job gains have been robust, and the unemployment rate has remained low. Inflation has eased somewhat, but remains elevated. None of those are loosening languages. Russia's war in the Ukraine causing tremendous economic hardship, elevated global uncertainty. Committee is highly attentive to inflation risk. This is exactly what I said. Strong language, but the quarter point rise. Committee seeks to achieve maximum employment, inflation 2%, blah, blah, blah. The committee decided to raise the target rate. Now, that's interesting. They're still saying 2%. 2% to me is unrealistic. So they're still going for 2%. They're going to have to do a lot more than this. The committee raising the rate to 4.75%. The committee anticipates that ongoing increases in the range will be appropriate. Ongoing increases in the target range in order to attain a stance of policy to return to 2% over time. So that means we're going past 5%, people, for sure. It doesn't. This is not the language of somebody saying with 1 quarter and we're out of here. Remember my prediction was 6% in June. We'll see if that happens. In determining the extent of future increases in the range, the committee will take into account the cumulative tightening of monetary policy, in the lags in which policy affects the economic activity and the economic and financial developments. In addition, the committee will continue reducing its holdings of Treasury securities and agency-backed blah, 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 as described in the plans. The committee is strongly committed to returning inflation to its 2% objective. In assess, this is bad. I don't see how the markets can react well to this. This is not good. They're going to continue to stop, to wind down their bond purchases. That's bad. They are going to continue to tighten until inflation is 2%. That's bad. Even though it's a quarter point hike, which is better than a half point hike, they're not stopping. They're just slowing their pace. In assessing the appropriate stance of monetary policy, the committee will continue to monitor the implications of the incoming information. Committee be prepared to adjust the stance if appropriate, if risks emerge that could impede the attainment of the goals. Okay, impede. They're not talking about, and this is the thing that's coming off the table right now. They're not talking about reversing. They are not going to ease. They are nowhere in their minds, or easing is not even a consideration on the table. They are talking about whether or not they're going to hit their 2% goal. And if they don't see that they're making progress towards it, and we are nowhere near 2%, and I don't see, it's not the wage thing we were just talking about. That's why I was talking about it, because we ran too long. But the wage thing we were just talking about is exactly that problem. Starbucks has to raise wages 10% eventually, whether California forces them to and other states force them to. Eventually, that's what's needed to set things right. Everybody needs a 10% raise, and that means Starbucks will have to raise their prices 10%, and then everyone will be happy. You might not be happy because you're paying $5 now for a Starbucks and you pay $5.50, but you know what? It's nothing to you. Otherwise, you wouldn't be buying a Starbucks in the first place. If you cared about 50 cents, you sure as shit wouldn't be going to Starbucks for your latte. I get an amazing lot. I get a what is it? A iced mochaccino at this French bakery that is to die for, and that is $3.75. And I go right past Starbucks to get it. But the point is, that's the equilibrium. And you hear these companies whining and complaining and lobbying and talking to Congress. We can't possibly do that, and they can't. You can do that one-sided math and say that they can't, but all they got to do is raise their prices 10% and dedicate that money to the workers, and they can all of a sudden. It is ridiculous to say that you can't raise wages, but the point is, eventually the job market will dictate this, and that's why the Fed is so keen on killing the job market, because if the workers have mobility, and 10 million open jobs means there's lots of mobility in the workforce, it means the workers are free to seek out a better job. Starbucks will then be forced internally to pay more because you can't keep a worker if you pay less. Oh, and by the way, that's something you're already seeing it. Okay, what do you see that directly affects you in a worker shortage? Is you already see that the level of service you're getting is dropping off considerably, right? There are less competent people working at Starbucks. There used to be a lot of nice young kids working at Starbucks who were pretty chipper and into everything and so on and so forth. Now Starbucks service is going downhill. A lot of places service is going downhill. McDonald's and Burger King and so on and so forth, those guys are borderline intolerable. Can't get the order right, can't get the food out, let the French fries run out, blah, blah, blah. It's not the same quality of people anymore, because the other people who were working there, who were nice people and decent workers, they've gone on to other jobs. Now you've got to go to the next level down, the people who were previously unemployed, and start employing them, because we haven't solved the workforce issue. We haven't increased the workforce. We're just digging into the unemployment pool. Now, some people are unemployed because they're not particularly good workers. This is where productivity, which we get a productivity report tomorrow, this is where productivity starts deteriorating when you have too many, when your economy is running too hot. And that's what puts the brakes on economic expansion, is you run out of qualified people to do the job, especially when you have no population growth and you have no immigration. Where are you getting the workers from? Now, I proposed that we expand daycare and free up the 20 million women who are taking care of children in this country at home. And so what are you doing? You're gonna, let's say in daycare, there's one person for 10 kids, right? And at home, there's one person for 1 or 2 kids, mostly 1, I think. So you're basically increasing, you're taking maybe 90% of those 20 million people you're freeing up, because 10% of them have to go take care of everybody else's kids. So you need more people to take care of kids. It's a little complicated, right? Everything relates to everything else. But some of the 20 million women who are in daycare, who are taking care of their kids at home, need to go to daycare centers with their kids and take care of other people's kids as well. That's what has to happen. That's how you get more, that's how you get everybody's kids are now taken care of. Now, if everybody's kids are taken care of, that means you now have 18 million women left who are done. Their kids are free. Now, these are, for the most part, college educated, professional women who can now fill all sorts of jobs. That's the easiest way to fix everything. We could increase the workforce drastically by simply fixing the daycare system in this country. Most countries take care of it for people. We don't, and then we bitch and complain about how we can't get a good workforce. It's insane. We do insane stuff. Anyway, appropriate stance. The committee would be prepared to adjust stance, blah, 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 blah. Okay, voting. Blah, 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 blah. It was unanimous. Nobody dissented from this vote. So this is what the Fed wants to do. This is, well, it is helping. I mean, the market's coming up actually from this, but it's not really particularly great for the market. I guess well, it doesn't matter, right? Look at the NASDAQ. So they're very happy with their quarter-point hike. I don't know that this is going to last, though. This is not, to me, the most exciting news. They are determined to get inflation down to 2%. I think that's the problem, is people aren't connecting the dots. It can't happen until wages stabilize, not stabilize, until wages become normalized to the inflation that we've already had and the inflation that's continuing and the inflation that will be required to normalize the wages. We have to reach a point of stability, and that's not now, it's not June, it's not the end of the year, next year, 2024. It's going to take all the way to 2024, and basically we should have 2 more years of inflation, close to 5%, not freaking 2%, and wages will have to go up 10% in it, but that's matching the inflation that we're expecting, and then we should be normalized. I mean, the Fed is saying ongoing rate hikes are appropriate, not hike. We are not done. So if we're not done at 4.35, that means 4.75, that means we're going to 5. And if we're not done at 5, it means over 5. Over 5 is not what people have been predicting. I've been saying 6, but over 5 is not what people have generally been predicting. So now we'll see how much trouble Powell can get us into. Anu says, the UK Chancellor is totally against wage increases. Also, nurses are striking, but again, they won't raise it. The wage for specialized workers in operating theaters, I'm not sure what that is only, I'm thinking operating theater like a war, but that's not what you mean, is only £18 for working extra. You mean like theaters? The normal rate is more in the range of £15. Many are leaving or taking early retirement. What do you mean? Wait, you can't possibly mean, I'm thinking now I'm thinking he means nurses. He said, all right, wait, I knew she got to clarify this. He says they won't, okay, nurse, he says also nurses are striking, but they won't raise the wage. The wage for specialized worker in operating theaters, which I imagine he means an actual operating room, is only £18. There's no freaking way. That's why I can't conceive of what you're saying. You're telling me, maybe I'm wrong about the exchange rate of a pound, but you're telling me that a pound, which is pound, a pound, which is $1.25, so you only pay 18 of those, 18 times 1.25, you only pay $22.50, which is what a fast food worker in California should be making. You're only paying $22.50 to a nurse who works in an operating room. Operating room nurse salary. That makes more sense. $29 to $37. That's where we are. We're like we can be up to double you guys. And you're talking, if you're talking London, then absolutely, I guarantee you that we're in the, Indeed says in Florida, it's here. Oh yeah, you don't go by Boynton Beach. That's not a real place. Like, I guess they do have a hospital, but if The overall Florida is $47 to $85 an hour. What is operating room registered nurse salary by state? 62, 58, 57. That makes sense. That's why I could not even conceive that you were talking about a nurse in an operating room. That's insane. Albert says his wife makes in Oregon, which is, like rugby or something. So in Oregon, she's making $45,000. I'm sorry, $45 an hour. Which is reasonable. I mean, again, if you're a nurse, I think you should do better than that. But anyway, so yeah, that guys is what's going on in England. It's not like they're striking frivolously. They're striking because they're being paid what we're supposed to be paying our fast food workers to be nurses in hospitals, in operating rooms, skilled nurses, not top-notch nurses, not bullshit nurses, not like changing bedpan nurses. These are the people who know what's what in the operating room and to help the doctors do the operation. Oh, it's sick. It really is sick. Yeah, we have a sick society that this kind of stuff is even allowed. That is nuts. Wow. Anyway, okay, so point being, all over the world, all workers are underpaid. I say that like a fact because to me it's an absolute fact. You can dispute it, but the gist of it is nobody can live. And we should really have a TV show like Survivor. We should have a TV show where we have CEOs and other wealthy celebrities and people like that, and they have to live by working at McDonald's and of course the problem is everybody would sue everybody because nobody wants to, McDonald's would sue for being represented this way, or maybe just give them the money and don't even make them work. But you should make people live on $15 an hour for a month. They've got to get an apartment. Yes, with no money in the bank, which is realistic for those of you, right? With no money in the bank and just some basic clothing and stuff, you've got to start working at McDonald's. We'll give you the job. You start working at McDonald's. You then will pay for an apartment. You will secure an apartment somehow. You will pay for the furniture, the cable, the heating, the electricity, the food. With your $15 an hour, with your $600 a week, that's $30,000 a year. Sounds like money, right? $30,000 a year, and $600, but less the taxes, probably about $500 that you got for take-home pay, and you're going to take care of it. So on $2,000 a month, let's see how you do. I would love to see that show. That would be a great, great television show. Really, really scary. They have the show Undercover Boss. I don't know if you've seen that, but there's the show Undercover Boss where the boss goes and works in his own company, which God bless these people for doing it. I got to tell you. I mean, but the funny thing is, and I don't know if nobody understands what irony is or nobody understands the math of the thing, but invariably in Undercover Boss, they, of course, they're looking for the story, but the boss will meet a person who works for them in their company, some dishwasher, a truck driver, a floor sweeper, whatever. They'll meet these people where they're working alongside them and having a really hard day, probably more work than they've done in 20 years or something. And these guys live exhausted. They go back to it. They send them back to a cheap hotel, but they do that. But it's only for a day or two, and then the next day they're back at their giant home. It's not like they change their lives. But even doing it for a day or two, they sit there with these people and they talk to them, and then they go. Then they end up helping them and like paying for their college cost or paying for their kids' operation or buying them a new car. Like they feel bad about the situation that these workers are in, and obviously the show encourages this to happen, but you can see a lot of it is like a genuine thing where they make a connection with these people and then realize they're impoverished because they work for them. And that's how he sets the wages. But what the hell good does it do when you have 100,000 employees who you're screwing over and you help one of them? I mean, I would be so pissed off if I was an employee watching that show and watching the chairman lavish gifts on somebody, one of my coworkers, you know, and not nothing against the coworker, but you know, it's like Jesus Christ. It's like they realize that these guys need an extra 10,000 worth of stuff just to make it through the next week. But so does everybody else, because everybody's underpaid, because the system is wrong and there's no proper metric for it. And we need to have a proper metric. And what California is proposing is saying $22. They're saying, screw you corporate jackasses with your $15 bullshit. You can't live on 15. You can live, you can scrape by, but that's not living, is it? When all you can do is work and go home and pay your bills and pray nothing goes wrong because you don't have any extra money, and just go week to week to week, where that's it. You wake up, you go to work, come home, you can't afford to go out, you eat macaroni and cheese, and you go to sleep. That's how it works. And you get up again and go to work. That's slavery. That's not life. The token salary that they give you to keep you alive until you can show up for your next shift is not some corporate benefactor. And until we address this issue, we are always going to have inflation, because the inflation is the result of paying substandard wages for decades. And this is, again, this goes back to where I worry about the market, because the entirety of corporate profits is generally a scam, because you're making the profits just like Southern plantations used to do. You're making the profits by enslaving people, by not paying them anything like what their labor is worth. That's where your profits come from underpaying your laborers. You know, the reason there's a dollar menu at McDonald's is because you have people who work for such low amounts of money that they can profitably sell you 6 chicken McNuggets for $1. Think about there's people who work at the chicken plant and people who work at the box plant. There's people who work cooking the food. And all those people putting in, even if it's 10 minutes each, even if it's 5 minutes each, they can profitably give you 6 McNuggets for $1. There's something wrong with that. There is something so wrong with that. And why do people need 6 McNuggets for $1? Because you're underpaying the workforce and they're so poor that's all they can afford. So how about, instead of fixing it by giving people cheap, unhealthy food, we increase the amount of money they have so that they can go out and spend more money for food and not have to have a $1 meal. They'll be happy to buy a $3.50 Happy Meal if you give them $22 instead of $15 for a salary. Then they've got every hour they can afford a Happy Meal. Instead, pay them $15 and they can barely afford the dollar menu. People are freaking out when they took it away. And nothing on that menu is healthy. And then what does that do? That then puts a burden on the medical system, and then you've got a lot of unhealthy people who eat poor diets because, and also that's the other thing, we subsidize bad food. We subsidize grain, we subsidize corn, we subsidize wheat. We don't subsidize Brussels sprouts, we don't subsidize lettuce, we don't subsidize tomatoes, we don't subsidize avocados. Why? And the why of that is because, and by the way, this is true because obviously the fast food places that have salads, like Wendy's used to have a salad bar, right? And Taco Bell had issues too. You can get food poisoning. So the companies don't want to sell anything that can get you sick. Fresh food can get you sick. It's a problem. It's got to be handled correctly all the way through the process. They don't want to bother with that. They want frozen crap that they can reheat and give you without getting you sick. so they don't get sued. They don't care if you're healthy, they care if you don't sue them for being unhealthy. But that's the problem in this whole, the whole system is set up to make it convenient for the corporations to make money off you. It's got nothing to do with whether or not the food actually should be served in the first place. That's a whole other problem with this entire country and how we do things. It's just we encourage the wrong behavior across the board. So that's crazy. But it's a lot of shit like that has to be fixed. But that's going to be hard to fix. That's much harder to fix. But the wages isn't hard to fix, and it will be fixed because the people are, again, look at England. Watch how it's going to spread throughout Europe. It'll come over here too. They're going to freak out. It's anti-American. It's communist. The people are going to want to unionize or do other stuff. It's all going to swing back this way, and you're going to start having to pay workers more money. Boy, if we had a national strike, people would go completely insane. But let me tell you something, the social media shit can blow up in their faces, and you can really spread something like that quickly. But it is because we are just drastically underpaying the workers, and just like, which I put a video the other day, the French Revolution, just like back then, you're just blind to it. The aristocrats like everything's great. Everything's fine. I think it's fine. My maid thinks it's fine. I asked my maid and my butler, they say it's great. They're happy. My driver's happy. He's happy. My itinerary that works for me, my retinue, whatever you call it, they're all happy. Everybody thinks it's great in the palace. Everybody who works in the palace is happy. I go out to the shops, all the shops I go to and spend a fortune. They're all happy. They think everything's great. That's my survey. And that's great because we live in this bubble. We do. We all live. All of us top 10% people live in a basic bubble. And I know that you all, you like to think you're talking to regular people, but the regular people we talk to are people who service the wealthy. They're not regular people. Go ask the people who service them. Those are the regular people. The trick is to go home with my cleaning lady and then follow her around and not talk to her about how everything's going, but go follow her and talk to the people she talks to when she's out shopping, when she's getting something done, when she goes to the dollar store, or when she goes to wherever she goes to shop and things. Ask those people how they think things are, because you don't go to those places. You don't, we're a buffer. There's a buffer zone for us, because the people who we generally will come in contact with in our daily lives are the people are being well taken care of. They're in a different level than the people at the lower rungs of society, and that's very sad. And those people are deeply, deeply struggling. The bottom 60%, the bottom 80%, I would say, they don't have a penny. They don't have an extra penny to their names. There's just a thing about how people don't have $1,000 for emergencies. I forget the number. I think it was everybody. I mean, dollars, 1,000 emergency. $56, 60%. 60% of Americans can't cover a $1,000 emergency. A $1,000 emergency, like my tooth cracked a couple of months ago, it's a $1,000 emergency. I had to go to the dentist. It was $1,000 to fix it, and it's cosmetic, so they consider it cosmetic. I'm like, it's my freaking tooth. It's like, how am I not going to do that? So, how would Americans cover an emergency $1,000 bill? Pay from savings, credit card, pay the bill and cut out other expenses, borrow from family and friends, take a personal loan. Wow. 60% of those with college degrees can cover it. Oh, 40% of people with college degrees can't cover it, as could more than half the people who make $50,000 a year could cover it. I mean, this is nuts. That's what I mean by people having nothing. It means even if they're not underwater, they are, even if they're not underwater, they have no breathing room at all. They're not saving money. They don't have extra. They're not putting away for retirement. And what happens when all these people retire? What happens when 60% of the people retire and we don't even have Social Security for them anymore? Which is like $2,500 a month about. That's what they get now if they retire. It's basically the same amount of money that somebody making $15 at McDonald's is going to take home. That's your retirement. Your retirement is basically a McDonald's worker's salary. And that's Social Security. After you put away 6.5% of your income, that was matched by 6.5% of your employer's income for your entire life. All you get back is a McDonald's worker's salary. You could have bought a McDonald's with the money that you put into the system. You could have owned a McDonald's, and instead you're going to get the salary of a McDonald's worker. It's really messed up. Oh, Powell. Look, it's Powell. Let's listen to him.
From a year ago. Inflation remains well above our longer run goal of 2%.
We need to stay restricted for some time.
December, total PCE prices rose 5.0%.
PCE up 5%.
Food and energy categories, core PCE prices rose 4.4%.
Core is 4.4.
Data received over the past 3 months show a welcome reduction in the monthly pace of increases. And while recent developments are encouraging,
there's a reduction in the pace of increases. Dow's now down 500. Told you.
Longer-term inflation expectations appear to remain well anchored, as reflected in a broad range of surveys of household businesses.
Inflation expectations are well anchored. I think that's because they don't know what they're talking about. That's not grounds for complacency. He agrees that.
It remains too high. The longer the current bout of high inflation continues, the greater the chance that expectations of higher inflation will become entrenched.
See, he's more worried about expectations than the actual inflation. He's saying the longer that there's high inflation, then eventually people start expecting more inflation, and that then leads to more inflation. I guess that's true. Because you expect more inflation, therefore you demand more salary because you don't expect inflation to go away. Then you damn well better get your raise.
We're highly attentive to the risks that inflation poses to both sides of our mandate, and we're strongly committed to returning inflation to our 2% objective.
Again, with a 2% objective.
At today's meeting, we raised the target range for the federal funds rate by 25 basis points, bringing the target range to 4.5 to 4.75%. And we are continuing the process of significantly reducing the size of our balance sheet.
I think I heard thunder.
We have raised interest rates.
If this webinar suddenly ends, it's because we got hit by lightning. Which happens a lot, frankly.
In order to attain a stance of monetary policy that to return inflation to 2% over time. We are seeing the effects of our policy actions on demand in the most interest-sensitive sectors of the economy, particularly housing. It will take time, however, for the full effects of monetary restraint to be realized, especially on inflation. In light of cumulative tightening of monetary policy and the lags with which monetary policy affects economic activity and inflation, the committee decided to raise interest rates by 25 basis points today, continuing the step down.
He is a terrible speechwriter. I don't know, or whoever's writing this is terrible.
Shifting to a slower pace will better allow the committee to assess the economy's progress toward our goals, as we determine the extent of future increases that will be required to attain a.
No classified documents found in FBI search of Biden's beach house.
And for the outcome.
See, I can picture Biden sitting at the beach reading classified documents.
We've been taking forceful steps to moderate demand so that it comes into better alignment with supply. Our overarching focus is using our tools to bring inflation back down to our 2% goal and to keep longer-term inflation expectations well anchored. Reducing inflation is likely to require a period of below-trend growth and some softening of labor market conditions.
Reducing inflation will require below-trend growth and a softening of the labor market. Can you believe this is what the Fed thinks they're supposed to do?
Cautions strongly against prematurely loosening policy. We will stay the course.
Strongly against prematurely loosening.
To conclude, we understand.
Oh, he's concluding.
Families and businesses across the country. Everything we do is in service to our public mission.
He understands that this is harming families across the country, but they have a mission and they're going to stick to it, no matter how much it hurts. And now it's Q&A time. This is when it usually really screws everything up. Or I don't know if it screwed up though, because frankly, oh no, see, we pop back up. We pack up to 300 now. So they liked the statement. They thought it was good. I thought it was shit, but is that, yeah, back only down 300 on the Dow. The NASDAQ is positive again. Wow. Some crazy movement. Let's see how we're looking on the 5-minute chart. Woo-hoo, look at that. That's fun. Wowie. All right, so they're going to decide to like this for now. That'll be fine. So that's where we are. And you can't go by the first day anyway. It has to be digested, and we'll see what happens. But basically, stay the course. That's what he's saying. Stay the course. And I don't think people understand the repercussions of what he's saying, because what he's saying is 5% is not where they're stopping. And let's see if we can get that dot plot thing. Fed dot plot. Dot plot. December 20th. Yep, that's pretty recent. Oh no, come on. Do we really have to watch a video? Oh. It's a short video, so hopefully we can find it. The dot plot shows projections for the Fed funds rate. Oh God. Isn't it great that they have an intern? Okay, good. Okay, thank you. That's all I wanted. Hey, intern, make a video. Okay, so expectations were this. Let's assume that's 5 1/4, right? There's got to be 4 of those that fit in the thing. So expectations 5 1/4 is the main expectation of stopping. 5 1/2. There are plenty of people at 5 1/2. Nobody's over 5 1/2 really. So we're now at 4.75 is where we are right this minute. They're definitely going to here, no question about that. And it sounds to me like they're going to go here, and I don't see why they would stop. So what you're going to get is a general disappointment as this solidifies in people's minds. As these dots move up, that's people who are going to be disappointed, and people who thought one thing about the economy are now going to be changing their minds. So this is going to pretty much invert. And that means, you know, how many total dots are there? I see 5, 7, 9, and that's 3, 6, 10. There's 19 dots. And so basically, if there's 19 total dots, about 50% of the people who had made projections are going to be disappointed. That's effectively what we're going to get out of that. Not only that, though, but this is fantasy land. This is where we have a problem, because this is not realistic at all, that the Fed is going to do this and then they're going to turn right around and start lowering rates and go back to 3%, 2%. You know, I've said this for years, and apparently people's memory is 0, because 3% is not a natural interest rate. It's not. It's artificial. The Fed, it causes us to run a bigger deficit when you do it. Now, um, the government sure as shit wants the interest rate to be 3% so they can borrow money at that rate, but that's not realistic. And even so, don't forget that we've looked at the government's rollover rate, and the government's rollover rate is like 66%. So it doesn't matter if it goes back down. We're going to have a raise of rates to 5%, 4.5% from 2% in the next 2 years. All our debt is going to be jacked up, and that's going to increase the deficit by $500 million a year or more. And how you can be excited about that, I don't even understand what people are thinking about when they say that's a positive. It's not a positive at all. So, and again, wages, wages, wages. We have not addressed the wage issue, and bringing prices back down without bringing wages up is not addressing the issue. And that's what the Fed is fighting to do. They're fighting to stop what is naturally, what should be happening from happening. People already cannot live on what they're being paid now. It cannot continue. It will lead to recession, lack of consumer spending, social unrest, all sorts of crap. You have to raise wages. We've told people it's going to 15. That's great. It went from 7 to 15, but that was just catching up. And it's not catching up enough. Then so you go from 7 to 15, but then you have 10% more inflation on top of that since we changed it to 15. Well, that means obviously it's got to go to 1650 at least, just to be even. We decided it should have been 15 before COVID. So maybe 20% increases since then. And that's not even addressing housing, medical expenses. Those kind of things have gone completely, education, crazy. And they're necessities. Necessities have gone completely crazy. Why? Because you can force people to give you the money. That's why those are great businesses. When you can force people to give you money, it's a great business. It doesn't matter what they have to give up. They're going to need the shelter. They're going to need the medical care. They're going to need the food. They're going to need the education. And that's why those lead the way in inflation. And that's why the Fed doesn't count some of those categories when they're talking about inflation. Because they're like, well, a house, this is their logic. You don't buy a house every year, so we only count that by X percent. That is literally what they do. You don't buy a house every year, therefore we don't count house prices as a detriment as an inflationary indicator. Some tiny percentage they put in there for how often people buy houses. There's all kinds of excuses they use to try to make things seem cheaper. They also do insane things like saying, your phone last year was $1,000, but it only had 256 gig of memory. This year, the same phone is still $1,000, but now it has 500 gig of memory. Therefore, your phone is 50% cheaper. And a faster processor. They'll factor that in too. And that's why when you look at these inflation reports, you see these categories like electronics have gone down. So that's minus 30% on electronics. And you're like, I didn't find my electronics to be 30% cheaper this year. And they're not. They just have more features. Therefore, they call that cheaper. In reality, not saving you any money. And it sure as shit doesn't balance the inflation. Doesn't help you at the grocery store because you have 500 gigabytes of memory. It'd be nice if it did, but it doesn't. It doesn't help me gives me a better grocery list, I guess. Powell, I do not feel a lot of certainty about the May meeting. I'm not sure what the question was, but that's interesting. But wow, Dow's only down 85 now. So the markets are loving it. We'll see if it lasts, that's all. And if it lasts, we'll start buying some things, because what are you going to do? I mean, earnings are what they are. Nobody seems to care about the earnings. And if nobody cares about the Fed, then we'll have to start finding some things to buy. We have, when is expirations? Expirations is the 17th. So we'll be watching the earnings. This week is going to finish. If we're still up after the weekend, we have to start thinking about picking some things off our watch list and getting a little bit more bullish. That'll be interesting. Whoa, the Dow is now only down 15 points. It's going to go green. 10 points. 6, 3. No, 9. Damn it. Almost made it. Anyway, so here, and then here's option expiration week. I'll do the portfolio review starting on the 14th probably. And we will, oh, shit. I'm going to be at a wedding. I'll be back Monday though. So yeah, probably starting the 14th. I got a wedding this day. I got a wedding. I'll be coming home that day. Yay, Dow's positive. Anyway, so when we make our adjustments, we'll probably, all right, thing number one is we're going to take the positions we have in our portfolio, and if they can or should be improved, we want to spend that money first. Let's make our positions as good as possible to start with. Then we'll start picking out the watch list and going back to our normal sort of bullish selections if everything stays where it is and it works out. But I'm sorry, again, we have a big thing that we talked about today, that COVID is basically, we can almost see that it's over, or it's become much less of a factor. That's a great thing. China seems to be reopening. That's going to be a good thing. And if nobody cares about the Fed, and if nobody cares about the gloomy outlook for earnings and things that everybody seems to think all these CEOs with their gloomy outlooks and with their missing targets, that's okay. And maybe it is. Maybe Q4 was just a tough quarter, and things are going to look up, and the CEOs are overestimating how bad it's going to be going forward. But I don't know, when it's my company and I tell you the conditions are bad, it's usually because I got some pretty good insight into the situation. So I wish we had more certainty, but we don't. But anyway, so that's our schedule for the month. We're into February already, so we got to start thinking about Q1 and making sure it's good. Now, on the other hand, as I mentioned this morning, though, our portfolios have made, I forget how much, but they made money. Oh, there we are. So, all right, we're at 7.4 million, which is crazy. I remember we set a stop in August of like $5 million or something like that, and now we're at 7.4 million. I mean, it is nuts. And our last review was 7.2. So there you go. So it's basically, we're up a little less than 200,000 in 2 weeks from the last review that we did. So for all of our, keeping ourselves balanced and all that, we're doing very well in this market, but we could be doing much better. We could be a lot more aggressive. We have a ton of cash. Oh, I even wrote that. We have cash. 66% cash in the long-term portfolio, 93% cash in the short-term portfolio. We have plenty of money to put down, and there are plenty of stocks that we like, not to mention the ones we already have that we can be more bullish on now that we're passing some of the danger. So, did we miss an opportunity to be more aggressively bullish and make more money? Of course we did. I mean, there's no question about it. But I would rather protect this ridiculous amount of money. And we've made the same decision multiple times in the last few years. It's like we protect, then we get aggressive, then we hedge, then we pull back, then we get aggressive again, then we protect again. There's a cycle to the whole thing. So the cycle we're in now is protecting. We're protecting these ridiculous gains, and now we're going to have a chance to put the money down. But our first thing we're going to want to do in our portfolios is improve the positions that we already have. And once we see how much money we have left after that, we can then go shopping. All right. So that's our plan. Thanks everybody for coming, and we will do this again next week. We're going to have some, like I said, it's going to be a lot more interesting next week, because we'll see what sticks on this one and figure out what we're going to do about it. Okay. So take care, everybody. Thanks. Bye.